Welcome to Somatic Shadow Work for Sleep, a meditation series that recalibrates the thoughts, actions, and habits that govern your daily life. Your guide in these meditations is Seth Cherepak, author of Awaken Your Shadow and founder of somatic axiology. These meditations speak to your dominant form of intelligence, known by cognitive neuroscience as value intelligence. Value intelligence, or VQ, operates upstream of your intellectual intelligence, IQ, and your emotional intelligence, EQ. VQ is the decentralized intelligence sprawling throughout your entire being, like an underground root system feeding every branch above it and the fruit it bears. VQ is the silent architect of the thoughts, decisions, and actions that seem to be under your conscious control, until they're tested by the pressures, challenges, and opportunities of your daily life. This is how somatic axiology succeeds in delivering on the promises made by the schools of New Age energy healing, EFT, breathwork, chakra work, sound healing, which address mainly only your EQ, and the school of conventional methods, NLP, positive affirmations, and mindset programs, which address mainly your IQ. Somatic axiology speaks to your VQ quietly and intentionally transforming the subconscious signal that governs them both, so your thoughts grow clearer and your feelings steadier. Listen to this in a place where your attention is free to shift from the worries and cares of the external world into the rich architecture of your internal world, where your transformation begins. In this episode, Activating Your Shadow Self, Seth guides you on the journey that gathers everything the earlier episodes began, the descent to meet your shadow face to face, and the integration that transforms it into your sacred ally. This is your step into wholeness, living from every part of yourself, instead of at war with any of them.
We will begin our journey with 4 deep breaths. Breathe in quickly, feeling your belly expand. Hold as your body begins to relax and your mind begins its descent. Breathe out, feeling your body relax and your mind descending deeper. Breathe in again, feeling your belly expand more and more, and hold. Breathe out slowly as your body relaxes more and more and your mind descends deeper and deeper. Breathe in again, your belly expanding more and more and more. Hold. Now begin the slow release, your body relaxing more and more, your mind descending deeper and deeper and deeper. Breathe in a final time, your belly expanding fully. Hold. Now breathe slowly out, your body relaxing completely, your mind descending deeper and deeper and deeper, all the way to the deepest part, the part beyond your thoughts, beyond your feelings, and beyond your conscious reach. You are now completely relaxed and at peace. It is late, and there is a part of you that you have been at war with for a very long time. You know the part you do not talk about. The part you have prayed would leave. The part you have tried to discipline, suppress, medicate, outrun, or drown, the impulse you hate in yourself, the hunger you are ashamed of, the anger that frightens you, the desire you have never said out loud, the darkness you are certain would disqualify you if anyone ever saw it. You have been told your whole life that this part of you is the enemy. And tonight we are going to question that. This is not self-help. This is somatic shadow work. Not a method for defeating your dark side. Not a technique for finally winning the war against yourself. Somatic shadow work is the descent beneath the war, into the body of a man who has spent his life fighting something in the dark, without ever once stopping to ask what he was actually fighting. Because here is what no one told you. There is more than one thing in the dark, and you have been confusing them your entire life. But we will get there. First, the war itself. Feel it in your body, because the war against your own dark side is not an idea. It is a posture. It lives in the flesh. Notice the bracing, not bracing against the world this time, bracing against yourself. There is a specific tension a man carries when part of him is standing guard over another part of him. A clench that is not facing outward, a clench that is facing in. Feel it. The low, constant muscular effort of holding something down, of keeping a lid on, of making sure the part of you that you are ashamed of does not get out. It sits in the gut. It sits in the chest. It sits in the jaw that has spent decades clamped around words it would not let itself say. This is the body of a man at war with himself, and it is exhausting, not because the dark side is so strong, because the holding never stops. You have been the prison guard and the prisoner at the same time. For 40 years, in the same body, and no one can rest in a body that is its own prison. This is part of why you are awake. Because sleep requires a kind of surrender that a man at war with himself cannot afford. To fall asleep, you would have to stop guarding, and if you stop guarding, the part of you that you have been holding down might rise. So you stay awake, on watch, guarding the cell, Let us name the lie you were handed. The lie is simple. It says that your dark side is your enemy. It says that the parts of you that you are ashamed of are the problem to be solved. That holiness is the successful suppression of your darkness. That goodness is winning the war. That if you could just defeat the bad parts of yourself, you would finally be whole. You believed it. Almost everyone believes it. The church taught some men a version of it. The culture taught other men a different version. The self-improvement industry sells a version of it every single day. Conquer your demons. Defeat your dark side. Kill the parts of you that hold you back. And it has not worked. Notice that in all the years you have been fighting this war, you have not won it. The dark side did not die. It went underground. It got quieter. It learned to wait. But it did not leave. And every year you fought it, something strange happened. The harder you fought, the stronger it seemed to get. The more you suppressed it, the more power it seemed to have over you in the moments you were weakest. You have wondered about that. In the honest hours, you have wondered why a lifetime of fighting your own darkness has left it stronger, not weaker. Tonight you are going to find out why. Because the war was built on a confusion. And the confusion is this. When you look into your own dark, you have always assumed you were looking at one thing, one darkness, one enemy, one bad part of you to be defeated. But there is not one thing in the dark. There are two, and they could not be more different. One of them is yours. The other is not. One of them is a part of you that was exiled a long time ago. A part that carries something you need. A part that has been waiting in the dark to be called home. The other is not a part of you at all. It is something that moved in, something that found the exiled part of you alone in the dark and began to feed on it. And here is the cruelty of it. The thing that moved in learned to wear the face of the part you exiled, so that when you looked into the dark and saw something you hated, you could not tell which one you were looking at. You assumed they were the same. You declared war on both. And in doing so, you made a terrible mistake. You went to war with the one part of you that was carrying the gift, while feeding the one thing that was actually feeding on you. The exiled self grew weaker because you were starving it. And the thing feeding on it grew stronger because war was exactly what it ate. That is why the fighting never worked. You have been starving your ally and feeding your parasite for 40 years. And tonight, in the honest dark, we are going to do the one thing the war never allowed. We are going to slow down and look and learn to tell the two of them apart. Because you cannot make peace with your dark side until you understand that your dark side was never one thing. There is a part of you in there that is sacred, and there is a thing in there that is a thief. And the whole of your freedom depends on knowing which is which. So stay here with me in the dark with the two things you have always thought were one. The body can rest a little now, because for the first time in 40 years, you are not being asked to fight. You are only being asked to see. So let us go into the dark together. Slowly, without weapons this time. For your whole life, when you have turned toward the dark in yourself, you have turned with a sword, ready to fight whatever was in there. Tonight, leave the sword on the bed. We are not going in to fight. We are going in to see, because there are two things in there. And the first work of your freedom is learning to tell them apart. Let us find the first one. The first thing in the dark is a part of you, a real part, a part that was born in you, a part that once was not dark at all. Go back. Before the war started, there was a boy who had this trait in its original form. The anger you are ashamed of now was once a clean, bright capacity to know when something was wrong. The hunger you hate now was once a pure, unembarrassed aliveness to the world. The desire that frightens you now was once a simple, holy reaching toward life. The defiance you have spent decades suppressing was once the God-given spine of a boy who knew his own mind. Every trait you now call your dark side began as a gift, a divine capacity, a piece of your higher self. And then something happened. The world the boy was born into could not hold that gift. The anger was punished. The aliveness was shamed. The desire was called sin before he even understood it. The spine was called rebellion and beaten flat. And the boy did the only thing a small body can do with a trait that is getting him hurt. He exiled it. He took the gift, the bright, clean, divine capacity, and he banished it into the dark. He sent a piece of his own higher self into exile, and down there in the dark, cut off from the light, cut off from expression, cut off from love, the gift did not die. It twisted. A capacity that was meant to be expressed and was instead buried alive does not stay beautiful. It curdles. It distorts. It becomes a shadow of the thing it was meant to be. The clean anger exiled became a simmering rage you are afraid of. The holy aliveness exiled became a compulsive hunger you cannot control. The God-given spine exiled became either a collapse or a cruelty. But understand what you are looking at when you look at that twisted thing. You are not looking at evil. You are looking at one of your own divine gifts in exile, wearing the distortion that exile forced upon it. This is your shadow. And here is the truth your whole life has hidden from you. Your shadow is not your enemy. Your shadow is your higher self in exile. The very thing you have been at war with is the very gift you have been missing. It is twisted because it is exiled, not because it is evil. And the moment you call it home, the moment you let it back into the light, into expression, into love, it begins to untwist. The rage relaxes back into clean, usable anger. The compulsion relaxes back into honest aliveness. The cruelty or the collapse relaxes back into a steady spine. This is your sacred ally. This is the part of your dark side that the title of this work is pointing at. The exiled self that becomes an ally the moment you stop fighting it and start calling it home. Now feel it in your body. Because the exiled self has a specific feeling if you know how to listen. When you turn toward it gently without the sword, there is a kind of ache there. The exiled self feels like grief. It feels like longing. It feels like a part of you that wants to come home. When you get quiet and turn toward your true shadow, the body softens even as it hurts. Because some deep part of you recognizes its own. The way you would recognize a son you sent away a long time ago, standing at the door. That ache, that recognition, that softening even in the pain, that is the feeling of your exiled self. Remember it. Because now we have to talk about the second thing in the dark. And it does not feel like that at all. The second thing in the dark is not a part of you. It was never born in you. It carries no gift. It has no exile to grieve because it was never home. The second thing in the dark moved in. Here is how it works. When you exiled that piece of your higher self, you left a wound where it used to be, an open wound, a room in the house suddenly empty, and an empty room in the dark, untended, full of shame and isolation, attracts things, not beings with horns and wings, something more subtle and more real, a pattern, an energy, a kind of parasite that feeds on exactly the conditions an exiled self creates. The old traditions had many names for these. They called them by the names of demons. The patterns of greed, of lust, of sloth, of rage, of gluttony, of envy, of pride. Modern minds have other names. Thought forms. Autonomous complexes. Self-reinforcing patterns that take on a life of their own inside a wounded psyche. The name matters less than the mechanism. This is a spiritual predator, and a predator does what predators do. It found the weakest, most isolated, most wounded part of you, the exiled self alone in the dark, and it attached to it the way a parasite attaches to a host. The way something predatory attaches to something wounded and alone. And it began to feed. It feeds on your shame. It feeds on your isolation. It feeds on the war. Every time you hate yourself, it eats. Every time you fight your own darkness, it grows. Every time you isolate in your shame, it settles deeper in. And here is the cruelty that has kept you confused your entire life. The predator learned to wear the face of your exiled self. It mimics the way a parasite disguises itself as part of the host's own body to avoid being detected and expelled. This thing disguises itself as part of you. So when the rage erupts, you cannot tell. Is this my exiled anger finally crying out to come home? Or is this the predator using my anger as a costume driving me toward destruction? When the hunger overwhelms you, you cannot tell. Is this my exiled aliveness asking to be honored? Or is this the parasite of gluttony wearing the mask of my hunger, feeding on me while it pretends to feed me? They look the same from the outside. And so you did the understandable thing. The tragic thing, you declared war on both. You could not tell the gift from the parasite. So you tried to kill everything in the dark. And in doing so, you starved the one and fed the other. But they do not feel the same. Not if you slow down. Not if you learn to listen with the body instead of recoiling with the mind. You already know how the exiled self feels. The ache, the grief, the longing to come home, the softening even in the pain. The predator feels nothing like that. The predator does not ache. The predator urges. The exiled self says in a small voice, "I am still here, please let me come home." The predator says in a loud and certain voice, "Do it now, you cannot stop, you have no choice, you are this thing." The exiled self wants to be integrated. The predator wants to take over. The exiled self feels like a part of you reaching for connection. The predator feels like a pressure pushing you toward isolation. The exiled self, when you turn toward it with love, calms. The predator, when you turn toward it with discernment, recoils. Because the predator cannot survive being seen clearly. It needs the confusion. It needs you to keep mistaking it for yourself. Because as long as you think the parasite is you, you will keep protecting it while you attack your own gift. This is the whole game. This is why the war never worked. You were never supposed to win the war. You were supposed to end it. End the war. Call the exiled self home. And starve the thing that was only ever feeding on the fighting. The discernment between these two, the ability to look into your own dark and know which is your sacred self and which is the thief wearing its face, is not a small skill. It is the oldest mark of spiritual maturity there is. The ability to tell true light from false light, true self from counterfeit, the gift from the parasite that feeds on it. Most people never learn it. Most people spend their whole lives at war with their own gifts, while feeding the very thing that is consuming them. You are not going to be most people, not after tonight. Because now you know there are two things in the dark. And in the deepest part of you, beneath the confusion of 40 years, you are already beginning to feel the difference. The one that aches to come home. And the one that only ever wanted the war to continue. Stay with that. Let the body keep learning the difference while we go deeper. There is nothing to fight here. There is only something to recognize, so let us stay in the dark a little longer, not fighting, just looking. Because now that you can begin to feel the difference between the two things in the dark, the exiled self that aches to come home, and the predator that only wants the war to continue, we have to look at what the confusion has actually cost you. 40 years of fighting, and you never ask the most important question: what was the fighting feeding? Start here. Every war needs fuel, and the war against your own dark side ran on a very specific fuel: shame, self-hatred, isolation, secrecy. Think about what the war required of you. To fight your dark side, you had to hate it. To hate it, you had to hate the part of yourself it lived in. To hate that part of yourself, you had to hide it. And to hide it, you had to be alone with it. No one could know, not your wife, not your closest friend, not your pastor, your mentor, your brother. The shameful part of you had to stay secret, which meant a part of you had to live in total isolation, in the dark, cut off from every human connection. And now recall what you learned about the predator. What does it feed on? Shame, self-hatred, isolation, secrecy. The exact things the war produced. Do you see it now? The war you waged against your dark side was a feeding operation for the very thing destroying you. Every night you lay awake hating yourself. You were setting the table. Every time you white-knuckled the suppression and told no one, you were serving the meal. Every time you isolated in your shame, certain that if anyone knew the truth about you, they would leave. You were feeding the parasite the one thing it cannot survive without. Your isolation. The predator does not fear your discipline. Your discipline is its favorite food, because disciplined suppression keeps the exiled self buried, keeps the shame burning, keeps you alone in the dark with the wound. And a predator wants nothing more than a wounded thing kept alone in the dark. This is the first cost. The harder you fought, the better you fed it. Now feel the second cost. While you were feeding the parasite, you were starving the gift. Remember what the exiled self actually is. A piece of your own higher self. A divine capacity banished into the dark. That capacity was meant to be lived. The clean anger was meant to protect what you love. The holy aliveness was meant to make you magnetic and present. The God-given spine was meant to make you a man others could lean on. And for 40 years, you have been at war with all of it. Which means for 40 years, you have been living without the gifts you were born to carry. Feel the specific exhaustion of that. Not just the exhaustion of fighting, the exhaustion of incompleteness, the sense which has followed you your whole life that you are operating at a fraction of yourself, that some essential power is missing, that you are somehow less than you were supposed to be. You were not wrong about that. You have been less than you were supposed to be. Not because you failed, because you exiled the very parts of yourself that would have made you whole, and then spent your strength keeping them banished. The man who fights his own anger has no fire when fire is needed. The man who fights his own hunger has no aliveness when life calls for it. The man who fights his own spine collapses at the exact moment he needs to stand. You did not just fail to defeat your dark side, you defeated yourself over and over. For decades, this is the second cost. The gift starved into silence while the parasite grew fat on the war. Now there is a third cost, and this one is the most important because it is the trap that catches the men who are too wise to keep fighting. Some men, somewhere along the way, figure out that the war is not working, and the spiritual world offers them an escape that sounds like wisdom. It says, stop fighting your darkness. Rise above it. Transcend it. Fill yourself with so much light that the darkness simply has no place to live. Think only positive thoughts. Stay in high vibration. Keep your eyes on the light and never look at the dark at all. And this sounds so much better than the war. So the man stops fighting and he starts ascending. He sweeps the house. He clears out the obvious darkness. He fills his days with practice and positivity and light. He gets the house clean, swept, tidy, presentable, and he leaves it empty because he never went down into the dark to find the exiled self. He never called the banished gift home. He just swept the shameful parts out of sight and filled the visible rooms with light. And there is an ancient warning about exactly this. When the unclean spirit goes out of a man, it wanders looking for rest and finds none. And it says, I will return to the house I came from. And when it returns, it finds the house empty, swept, garnished. And finding it empty, it brings 7 other spirits more wicked than itself. And they all move in, and the last state of that man is worse than the first. This is the trap of the spiritual bypass. A swept house is not a safe house. A swept house is an empty house. And an empty house is the most vulnerable house of all. The man who only sweeps, who clears out the darkness without ever filling the space with his own reclaimed self, has not become safe. He has built a beautiful, clean, empty room, and he has hung a sign on the door that says vacant. And the predators read that sign. This is why so many of the most spiritual seeming men are quietly the most haunted. The all light, no shadow man. The man who has transcended his anger but cannot protect his family. The man who has risen above his desire but has no fire left for his wife. The man whose house is so clean and so empty that 7 worse things have moved into the rooms he refuses to look at. Sweeping is not integration. Suppression buries the gift and feeds the parasite. Bypass sweeps the gift away and invites worse parasites in. Both leave the house empty, and an empty house always fills with the wrong tenants. There is only one thing that actually works: not fighting the dark, not rising above the dark. Going down into the dark, finding the exiled self, and bringing it home to fill the house. A house that is full has no vacancy. A house that is inhabited by your own reclaimed higher self, expressed, integrated, alive in the light, offers the predator nothing to feed on and nowhere to live. You do not defeat the parasite by fighting it. You do not escape it by rising above it. You starve it by filling the house it was living in with the very self you exiled. This is why you could never win the war. The war was never winnable. The war was the predator's food. And the bypass was never safe. The bypass was the predator's invitation. The only way out was the one way you were never told to go. Down, toward the exiled self, with love instead of a sword. And that is exactly where we are going next. Not to fight, not to ascend, to open the door and call your own gift home. Rest here for a moment. The war is already beginning to end. Not because you won, because you finally understand what you were fighting and what you were never supposed to fight at all. So we go down now, not with a sword, not with a ladder to climb above it all. We go down into the dark with the only 2 things that have ever worked: love for what is yours, and discernment to know what is not. Because the witness has shown you the truth now. There are 2 things in the dark: the exiled self that aches to come home, and the predator that has been feeding on the war. And seeing is not enough. You have understood things before, and the understanding did not free you. Because the war was not fought in your mind. It was fought in your body, and it can only end in your body. So tonight we are not going to add a belief. We are going to perform the oldest spiritual work there is. Discernment. And the open door. The protocol has 3 movements. The first is called turning toward. The second is called the discernment. The third is called the open door and the refusal. Start with the first. Turning toward. For your whole life, when you sensed the dark in yourself, you turned away, or you turned on it. Tonight you are going to do neither. You are going to turn toward it. Gently, the way you would turn toward a frightened child, not a threat. Find the place in your body where the dark thing lives. You know where it is? You have spent your life with your back to it. Maybe it is in the gut. Maybe it is low in the belly. Maybe it is a heat in the chest, or a pressure behind the sternum, or a tightness you have never let yourself feel all the way. Put your hand there, and instead of bracing against it, soften toward it. You are not opening a cage. Nothing is going to leap out and destroy you. You have believed that for 40 years, and it was never true. It was the story that kept you on guard. The dark is not a monster. The dark is a room you stopped entering. And tonight you are simply going to open the door and look inside. Breathe into the place your hand is resting. And say, silently, the first true thing you have said to this part of yourself in decades. I am not here to fight you. I am here to see you. Notice what happens in the body when you say that. Something may loosen. Something may rise toward you. Something that has been waiting a very long time to be looked at without hatred. Stay there. Hand on the place. Turn toward, not against. Now the second movement, the discernment. This is the heart of the entire work. Because as you turn toward the dark, things will begin to stir, and you must learn in real time in the body to tell which is which. You are going to ask one question, and then you are going to feel for the answer, not think for it. The question is this: is this mine? Is this my exiled self? Or is this the thing that has been feeding on it? And here is how you tell. Your exiled self, when you turn toward it, softens. It aches. It grieves. It reaches back towards you. When you put your attention on it with love, it feels like relief, like a held breath finally released, like something in you saying, "Finally you came back for me." The exiled self draws you toward connection, toward expression, toward home. It wants to be felt. It wants to be honored. It wants to be lived in the light and healthy form. That is your sacred ally. And the way you know it is the softening, the ache, the pull toward love. Now feel for the other one. Because there is a second voice in the dark, and it does not soften when you turn toward it. It pushes. It urges. It does not ache to be loved. It demands to be obeyed. When you turn toward the predator with discernment, it does not melt with relief. It gets louder, or it goes cold. Or it tries to pull you somewhere fast, somewhere secret, somewhere alone. The exiled self says, "Stay, feel me, let me come home." The predator says, "Go, act, now isolate, you have no choice, this is just who you are." The exiled self pulls you toward connection. The predator drives you toward isolation. The exiled self can be held. The predator cannot be satisfied. The exiled self calms when you love it. The predator recoils when you see it clearly. This is the discernment. This is the true mark of spiritual maturity, not the ability to feel spiritual things, the ability to tell true light from false. Your own self from the thing that wears its mask. And you do not do this with your intellect. You do it with your body, because the body has always known the difference. You were just never taught to listen. So tonight you listen. Turn toward the dark and feel for the ache that softens. That one is yours. And feel for the pressure that urges. That one is not. Now the third movement, the open door and the refusal, 2 acts, one for each thing in the dark. First, the open door. You have found the exiled self, the one that aches, the one that softened when you turned toward it. Now you are going to do the thing you have refused to do for your entire life. You are going to call it home. Speak to it, in the silence or under your breath, in your own voice. You are not the enemy. You were never the enemy. You were a gift I was not allowed to keep. And I sent you away to survive, and I have spent my whole life fighting the very thing I most needed. I am sorry. You can come home now. The anger I exiled, I welcome home. I need your fire to protect what I love. The hunger I exiled, I welcome home. I need your aliveness to feel my own life. The strength I exiled, I welcome home. I need your spine to stand where I have been collapsing. Whatever it was that you banished, call it by name and welcome it home, and feel the house begin to fill, because this is the secret the war never understood. You do not become safe by emptying the house. You become safe by filling it with your own reclaimed self, expressed, integrated, alive in the light. A full house has no vacancy. And now the refusal, because there is still the other thing in the dark, the one that did not soften, the one that urged. You are not going to fight it. Fighting was always its food. You are going to do something it cannot survive. You are going to see it clearly, name it, and refuse it. Turn toward the pressure. The thing that drives you toward isolation, toward shame, toward the compulsive act, toward the secret. And say to it calmly without war, I see you. You are not me. You have been wearing the face of my own exile and feeding on my shame. And I am taking that food away. I am not going to fight you. I am not going to hate myself for you. I am not going to hide you in the dark where you grow strong. I am going to fill this house with my own returning self, and you will find there is no longer any room for you here. What has been feeding on me, I refuse. Feel the difference between these two acts. The welcome is warm. It pulls inward toward the heart. The refusal is cool and clear and steady. It does not rage. It simply closes a door that was never supposed to be open. One you bring close. One you let go. One is mine. One never was. This is the sovereign contract for the man who has been at war with his own dark side. Say it now. Not from the mind. From the chest where the war was fought. From the hand still resting on the place where the dark lives. What is mine I welcome home. What has been feeding on me I refuse. Say it again. Slower. What is mine I welcome home. What has been feeding on me I refuse. This is the whole of it. This is the end of the war that was never winnable, and the beginning of the discernment that sets a man free, not the defeat of your darkness. The reclaiming of your gift and the starving of the thief. And here is what this work returns to you. Wholeness. Not the brittle, swept clean emptiness of the man who rose above his shadow, not the exhausted vigilance of the man who fought it. Wholeness. The house full, every exiled gift called home and living in the light, every parasite starved out for lack of shame to feed on. The anger home become honest protection. The hunger home become real aliveness. The strength home become a spine others can lean on. And the dark side you spent your life fighting, revealed at last as what it always was beneath the distortion. Not your enemy, your sacred ally, your own higher self, finally home. Every time you turn toward the dark with love instead of a sword, every time you welcome what is yours and refuse what is not, the house fills a little more, and the war grows a little quieter, and the thing that lived on the fighting grows a little more hungry and a little more gone. So let the war be over now. Not won. Over. There is a difference, and your body is just beginning to understand it. A war that is won leaves a victor standing over a defeated thing, still armed, still braced, still watching the body of the enemy in case it moves. A war that is over leaves no enemy at all. because you have finally understood that there was never an enemy in the dark. There was only a piece of you that you had not yet met, and a thief that was feeding on the fact that you had not met it. Let your breath go slow. Let the hand that has been resting on the dark place soften completely. Feel the weight of your body against the bed, held by the earth, held by something deeper than the earth, and feel the house. The house that was swept and empty for so long. The house that the war kept under siege. The house the bypass tried to keep so clean it stayed vacant. Feel it filling, not with light you imported from somewhere else, with your own returning selves. The exiles coming home. And as they come home, something happens that the predator cannot survive. The house becomes inhabited. And an inhabited house has no vacancy for the thief. You did not cast it out with force. You did not rise above it with light. You simply came home, and there was no longer any room for what had been living in your absence. This is how the predator starves. Not in battle, in your homecoming. Now let me tell you what this night has actually been, because this was not simply one more room in the house. Over many nights you have walked through the rooms of yourself. You met the one who could not say no, and you gave him his spine. You met the one who carried everyone, and you let him set the weight down. You met the one who could never feel safe, and you let him put down the watch. You met the one with the engine and no road, and you gave him the open frontier. You met the one who outsourced his knowing, and you turned his own signal back on. You met the one behind the mask, and you let his real face come forward. You met the one climbing the endless ladder, and you brought him back down into his own body. You met the one holding the whole world, and you let him become a son instead of a substitute. 8 rooms. 8 exiled selves. 8 gifts called home. But there was always a danger hidden inside that work. A danger no one warns you about. Because the moment a man learns that his dark side carries a gift, he becomes vulnerable to the oldest deception there is. He can begin to believe that everything in his dark is sacred, that every urge is a gift, that every impulse is his higher self, that whatever rises from the deep must be welcomed because the deep is holy, And that is how a man who set out to integrate his shadow ends up enthroning the very thing that was feeding on him. That is the counterfeit. The false light that calls itself integration. The voice that says there is no thief, there is only you. Surrender to all of it. Tonight was the protection against that. Tonight was the discernment that guards every other room. Because it is not enough to know your shadow carries a gift. You must also be able to tell the gift from the thief that wears its face. This is the oldest mark of spiritual maturity. Not the power to feel the unseen, not the power to walk in the dark, the power to tell true light from false, to know your own returning self from the counterfeit that would use your homecoming as a doorway. A man who can call his exiles home but cannot discern the thief will eventually be ruled by something wearing the mask of his own depths. A man who can discern but will not call his exiles home stays at war and feeds the thief through the fighting. You need both. The open door for what is yours, and the clear refusal for what is not. What is mine I welcome home. What has been feeding on me I refuse. This is the discernment that completes the whole journey. And so let me name it for you plainly before this night folds into sleep. Your dark side can become your sacred ally. But understand exactly what that means now. Your sacred ally is the exiled self, the banished gift. The piece of your higher self you sent into the dark to survive a world that could not hold it. That one comes home. That one becomes the very power you have been missing your whole life. The thief was never your ally. The thief never will be. And you do not need to befriend it or fight it or fear it. You need only to fill the house so completely with your own returning life that it simply has nowhere left to live. This is what I wrote, Awaken Your Shadow, to teach. Not how to defeat your darkness. Not how to rise above it, how to descend into it with discernment, how to tell the exiled self from the predator that feeds on it, how to call every banished gift home, and starve every thief by the simple act of becoming whole. This series has been a doorway. The book is the house. Every room mapped. Every exiled self named. Every predator that feeds on each one and the discernment that drives it out. When the light returns and the noise of the world rises again, read it slowly, like a man walking back through his own house, opening every door, welcoming home what is his, and refusing with a clear and steady voice what never was. But that is tomorrow. Tonight you have done enough. Tonight you ended a war that was never winnable. Tonight you learned to tell your own gift from the thief that wore its mask. Tonight you opened the door and called your exiled self home. And tonight the thing that lived on your shame began to starve for lack of a war to eat. So let me speak the blessing over you now. Listen to it with your body, not your mind. The body, that tired animal, that faithful beast, is dismissed from the watch at last. The jaw unclenches. The guard stands down. The hand that held the sword against your own depths opens, and the sword falls. And all the war that tried to become your whole life finds the one door it cannot follow you through. Blessed is the man who stopped fighting himself. Blessed is the sword that falls. Blessed is the door that opens to what was exiled. Blessed is the exiled self, finally called by name and welcomed home. Blessed is the discernment that knows the gift from the thief. Blessed is the house that is full and therefore safe. Blessed is the thief that starves for lack of shame to feed on. Blessed is the dark side revealed at last as a sacred ally. Blessed is the whole man with every room inhabited and every gift home. Blessed is the final gate where the soul walks on. No longer at war with the very self it was given. You can set the war down now. You are not required to fight your own depths to be good. You are not required to rise above yourself to be holy. You are not required to hate the gift you were given in order to be safe. Let the sword stay where it has fallen. Let the house stay full. Let the exiles rest in the rooms they were always meant to fill. Let the breath go slow. The war is over. The exile is home. The thief is starving in an empty doorway with nothing left to eat. And the dark side you feared your whole life turns out to have been your own higher self. waiting in the dark for the day you would finally stop fighting and call it home. Sleep now. The house is full. The doors are kept, and nothing that feeds on the dark can live in a man who has brought himself home. Tonight you learn to tell what is yours from what was feeding on you. The descent is complete. Every orphan child has come home. In a moment something new will begin playing automatically. Awaken your shadow, the audiobook, from the first page, in my own voice. These 9 nights gave your body the experience. The book gives you the full teaching, every self, every devil by name, every contract, and the daily practices that keep the house full for the rest of your life, because the predators wait for awakened men to forget. If you're ready for your full awakening, keep listening. The audiobook begins at the end of this video.